Welcome everyone to Charts Chat for April 17th, 2018. All right, so the agenda's been shared. There's no names next to any of the line items here, so I guess we can start at the top. Did anybody here throw up the stable image version one?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this pull request which I linked. And they don't want to put the stable image, they want to use latest because this is their update policy, kind of. And I find that kind of weird because they also have stable images in Docker Hub, I think. And I think we should require a stable version. Usually we do. I mean, a release is a release, and I wouldn't want to have a latest image in there in general.
Yeah. Let's see.
Huh. It's interesting.
They do releases. You're right. In fact, their latest is also the same as a release, the 1.5.0 release.
Yep.
They say like pinned versions are a pain in a lot of our environments, and we generally want to track latest. I would say it's a pain the other way around because you expect surprises.
Yeah, I would say it's a pain the other way around because then you don't have control. For example, if you do latest and you push to a dev environment and everything works, or a QA environment, and then the version gets incremented, you push it to production, and then you get a different version than what you tested, and you don't realize it. And
Yeah.
so pinning versions are really important in a lot of environments. And so don't we have a policy that you need to use a pinned version?
I think.
I thought we did. Yeah.
I think it's in the guidelines. Let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that too, I think.
Yeah, so what did it say? Oh yeah, image tags should use stable versions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Under configuration. So I'm just thinking about this chart here. It's LogDNA agent, which I believe is an agent for a SaaS service. And so the only thing that the reason why they may want to use latest here is if if you're using a really old version that doesn't work with the latest version of the SaaS, that might be a problem for them. That said, if that pod never restarts, then it's always going to be stuck to that older version anyway. So I don't know if that's the reason why they want to use latest and image pull policy always, but that might be something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the pros and cons. We have a policy for a reason. Like, I still want to pin, right? And that's our default policy. And I think going with the latest is going to end up creating long-term problems for us. Just if anybody actually does try to use this for real and they want to have everything locked down, do you actually trust your upstream? Are you auditing? How does this all work? And at least in enterprise environments, we're a lot more picky about what we run. Sometimes we actually have to build the images ourselves. In some of the enterprise environments, you can't even grab upstream images, depending on your policies and what you've got to go under and what regulations you're under. And so I'm more of the pinning side of things, and I would ask them to pin anyway because we don't acquiesce to everybody else's policy. They come to our policy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, and also going back to the thing I said about the SaaS thing, if it happens that someone's on an old version that doesn't work with the SaaS thing, that there should be an error there on the SaaS side saying you need to go and update your agent, and that should be a straightforward process. So yeah, I think we can probably stick to our policy here.
Yeah, and if you're a SaaS service, right, you're going to have people who are pinning. You can't just always count on them doing latest anyway. And so if they're saying, if that ends up being a problem, just to speculate for a moment, they don't want to do that, then they're going to run into other issues because if they've got big companies, they're going to enforce pinning.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I'm happy to weigh in on this issue, Reinhard, if you want me to, and point to
Okay. Yeah. If you want to. Sure.
All right. No, I think that's good. The next one was the Redis renaming Redis HA to Redis Sentinel.
Yeah, I brought this up. So this one came up with there was a set of changes to the Redis chart, the stable Redis chart, to add cluster support. I don't think it's configured by default. I think if you bump up the replicas, then it enables cluster support. But it does it in a fairly different way to the existing Redis-HA chart. So the Redis-HA chart uses Sentinel, which is entirely valid but different approach. So I was wondering if it made sense to rename the Redis HA chart to Redis Sentinel to make it more clear what the strategy for replication is there. And that's similar to MongoDB, for example, which has the MongoDB replica set name. So it's very clear what replication strategy is being used there. I don't think we've ever renamed a chart before, though, so that might be.
I think we did once.
Hey, Vic.
Which one was? Hey there. But yeah, I think if it makes it more clear, there's no way to symlink charts, right? Like make it a nested version of itself or something like that, so that at least it still works, or just kind of leave it at its current version and say upstream is over here and add a note.
I was thinking the way we do it is deprecate and tell people to move over to Redis-Sentinel, but yeah,
I think we should deprecate the old chart if it's broken, but I don't think we should then rename another chart to the same name the old chart had.
Yeah, so some of this comes down to the logistics of the repository as well, right? So we probably would have to deprecate it, the old one, and then copy everything to the new one, because if somebody ever took the Redis HA name again and started releasing versions, they'd intermix and it would cause future problems, right? Just the way our build tooling works.
The symlink idea is actually interesting, though. Can you have symlinks in Git repos?
You can.
And would Helm package work with that?
Don't know.
And does it work across? Does it work across both Linux, Windows, and Mac, all environments?
And I don't know.
Windows symlinks are different.
Yes. Windows
is different?
Yeah.
Windows is not.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure symlinks is a good idea. That it's not very.
Just to be clear, I was saying a symbolic link of some sort, not necessarily file system symlink.
Right.
Inheriting the chart or using it as part of requirements and backporting values. I mean, there are many ways to make it look like you can still get the chart running. You know what I'm saying?
I think given that we have the policy for deprecating, it's probably just easier to go and do that.
Yeah, I think notes plus deprecation, and say, hey, by the way, this is the last release of this chart. You need to go to this other one, and making sure that Helm upgrade new chart still works on the old one. I think it's good.
And and as long as the chart doesn't actually change itself, that should more than work. So okay.
So a quick question. Aside from the short namespace name that's used, is there what's the end value to users to, what's the reason in changing the short little bit with stable, the name you do, the way it's spaced in our directory? We're asking people to jump through hoops. We're doing a bunch of work. So what's the end value for people doing that?
I think it would be on the new user path. They would be more clear on what they're getting out of the box with that chart. We had problems with a lot of implementations of Redis HA, where it wasn't HA to begin with, where people misunderstood whether it was the active type stuff or the sharding stuff. So I think there's enough confusion on the uptake side. It's going to be painful for anybody and everybody who's been using the Redis HA chart. What would be great to see is how figure out a way, if we could figure out how how many people are using it, right? And what the level of usage is, if it's people that are using it in CI or if there's people that are using it in production. I don't know that we have a good avenue for that kind of feedback today. So something to think about how we start getting that.
Yeah, I think the value, as I think Isaac says, for new users, it makes a lot of sense as there are now multiple approaches for Redis in the stable repo. How do you go and pick the right one that fits your needs, right? Because Sentinel might be something you need, or you might want something more Kubernetes native. So yeah, I think that's where I see the value in renaming it, because otherwise, you're going to have to dig into the Redis HA chart to figure out what it's actually doing. As far as users, we have the stats to see how many charts are downloaded, right? But that isn't always.
Yeah, it's a number.
Yeah.
I wish we had like in some future where charts have taken over the planet, a chart, advisory board where we could reach out to end users and say, hey, we're about to change this stuff. What do you think? We don't have anything like that, and it would take a long time to get there, but I definitely think it's something we need to start thinking of as we, I guess, are fixing things that we've maybe made bad decisions on or have now become harder to deal with. These things are going to keep coming up, and we're not going to know who we're breaking or how bad we're breaking until we figure out a way to talk to these folks.
But isn't that what semantic versioning is all about?
But then still in this case, like, what do we do with a rename of a chart, right?
Yeah, true.
And still, I'd like to be in the semantic versioning case, but we still don't have a good definition of what it means to version a major version number of a chart. If I change the Redis HA from Sentinel to cluster and bump the major version, is that cool? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, there's no real way to have a changelog right now for charts. So, even if there is a semantic version change, it's not. You kind of have to dig into the commit history to see what actually was changed.
Is it a case? That sounds like a case for changelogs per chart. Yeah.
That does. It
kind of worms, yeah.
Because a couple of things come to mind. This really does get into the case where maybe it would be useful to start doing changelogs on a chart, and then finding ways to use that. I mean, it could be just a standard Markdown file that follows maybe a recommended structure, and then
There's a funky. Isn't there a changelog? Changelogs are marked in anyway. So generally, yeah.
Yeah, and we could add it to the README too. At the bottom of every README is a changelog section, and you just put why did you do this and the version, and start really simple.
Yeah, that gets messy. It's probably better to start straight with changelogs, then where everything is straight off.
Yeah. But even when it comes back to this Redis HA one, right? So I like the idea of a changelog, but I also could the README and all the documentation be changed so that because we're really just talking about that directory name. That's all we're talking about changing, because everything else, the patterns it uses, how it uses, that can all be updated in the README and everywhere else. And if I'm searching for it on kubeapps and I search for something, right, it should be able to pull information from that README that gives all those extra details. All we're talking about is renaming the short name, not all of the other rich information that can be given.
I think the issue is if you did Helm search Sentinel today, I don't think it would show up. And kind of at a glance, just being able to see Redis, and actually I lie, Helm search Sentinel does work. So I guess it is searching either the README or the description or something. But yeah, if I don't know, if I did a Helm search Redis, it's not clear to me that chart's using Sentinel.
Okay, so it's the Helm search case, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with tools like with tools like CubeApps Hub, it's a little easier to see what's going on as you have the README, but yeah, definitely the Helm search cases. There's no way to just view a README, or I guess you can inspect a chart, but I don't think that. Does that show you the README if you inspect a chart? I don't remember.
I think it's only the values file that gets spit out.
Right. Yeah. So then, yeah, it is.
And then does it spit out the notes as well?
That would be after installing. It doesn't spit out the notes.
I know that status. Yeah, status spits out what's in notes. Yeah.
We should be able to do something to help people get to the READMEs then. This sounds like some UX improvements on Helm for the experience of interacting with individual charts.
Yeah, I think the issue is that to get to the README, you have to download the chart table. But there could definitely be a command like Helm get README or something.
Helm docs.
Helm docs chart, yeah.
Chart docs.
Yeah, so the README is not stored in the index, which means you have to download the table to even read it. And I think also the README is optional, although in a stable repo we make it required. But for Helm, I think it's optional.
And you can switch a release to a new chart anyway, can't you? I think.
I think so.
Yeah, I think I've done that. I renamed one of my charts and then upgraded it. Did a new release and it worked. But hey, cool.
Side grade.
Yeah, yeah. I renamed the elk stack chart to Elastic Stack and thought, hey, can I upgrade my current release to this new chart? Oh, look, it works.
Yeah, technically you could update Redis to WordPress if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think it replaces all the resources as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Adnan, you're going to go for the rename and figure out the user-facing side of it?
Yeah, I'll create a PR and I'll just CC kind of everyone who's contributed to the chart just to make sure that that's okay.
Awesome.
Anyway, hi, I'm new here, obviously, but yeah, been hanging around for a while. I missed the other bit because I was on backlog grooming.
Howdy.
Yeah.
Hey.
Been mostly concentrating on elk charts and a few other things. But, yeah.
Sweet. So the next one here is discussion about community charts, collecting analytics.
Yeah, so this one, I have some opinions that I put into the issue there, and I think we've already lost this particular chart maintainer and charts repo user. They've decided to post their own charts for various reasons, including the fact that we move slowly on things that they need to get their products out the door and in the hands of their users. So I think we need to come up with a strategy for facilitating people that are shipping their own software. I think we've failed that use case, and this is one example of that.
Like a mirror of upstream or something.
Yeah, well, in general, like this particular company wants to host. They have maybe 4 or 5 charts, and they wanted to have that be the upstream for their products and the way that they tell their users to install. So we've had enough, I guess, delays in review and stuff like that they no longer want to do that. And one of the examples was when they added a flag to enable disable analytics in their application, and we blocked that PR to discuss, and it took us, I think now we're on about a month of discussion on that, and this is when we finally got around to it. So that's a month delay for that person's, that company's product getting delayed by us. So.
Yeah, this kind of comes to the whole problem of the queue is getting pretty busy for pull requests. It's a lot of work to maintain the queue. In fact, if you go look at the contributions for the charts repo, there are a lot of...
It's ridiculous.
The contributions are really up, right? So even though we continue to merge more and more and more stuff, more and more things are coming in. I mean, go look at the graph. Here, I'll drop the link in for contributors, and you're going to see why we've got the problem right there. I mean, look at this spike for contributions that we're getting, right? It's big, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, go and then go look at the backlog and look at how many more charts people want to contribute that we can't even review. This morning I was going through things. I was like, updated README. I'm like, okay, I'll go review this one real quick. And I realized that was just the last commit on a new chart that somebody wanted to contribute. There's so many. Our repo model right now is having trouble scaling with the number of people who review things and the number of people who've owned things and the way the whole thing works. And that's a concern. It's just, we're having trouble keeping up with everything being in here with the way this all works.
Yeah, that's. I noticed we've been contributing some things and running off locally built copies. You know, we've got a repo which is managing our two clusters. We've got some of the stuff that hasn't been merged yet. We've got just local charts we're deploying out of that. But yeah, totally understand. There's another reason why I'm applying for the membership.
And
to help you guys.
And we've still got the same amount of maintainers that we had almost a year ago, from like a hands-on maintainership perspective, which as the charts repo has doubled and tripled, that just can't continue to be the case. I've gone mostly on maintenance mode for my charts because I don't have as much time lately to do these things. So I think it's something we need to start figuring out a new model for.
Hey, this is Paul. So have we ever talked to some of the folks out at the config management places where they've kind of had community versions of like, the Chef supermarket and Puppet Forge and all of that stuff, and tried to maybe do like a lessons learned with them, find out if they ever solved these problems or if there's still problems they have. Feels like that might.
We had some time with them at the Helm Summit, which was specifically the Chef folks, and that was super useful. I think that the big thing that came out of that is like our model of policing every change. You're on some gradient here of like trying to keep quality versus just letting everybody commit whatever they want. And they, I think, went more toward the, you can commit it, and then they had the stars mechanism and those kinds of things that allowed the good, quote unquote, good ones to bubble up to the top. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of just had a different approach from the get-go. So I think we need to figure out how to go from this side of policing everything that goes into the repo and get ourselves more either in the middle or on the other side, and to be comfortable with that.
Can we,
idea. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we build more into CI and get it to do more of the policing? Or
yes,
that's what I've always asked for. I don't know how many more Reinhardts are going to come along. I certainly am 100x more passive in my review than Reinhardt is, and I can't scale to know everything that's happening in the repo. He's done an amazing job of it, but I would like for us to be able to say CI is green, go, and just leave it at that with a light look at it, just to make sure that there's nothing obviously mining Bitcoin in the middle of it. That would be my ideal state, and then we could just kind of just be making sure that there's nothing insane going in. But if it kind of works based on the test, then that is what it is. And then it's the job of the chart maintainers to get the right tests in place to verify that their changes are good. The other thing we do was add more maintainers to each of the charts. The problem then becomes if your chart only has one owner or approver, then that person can submit something, but then has to approve it themselves, or has to get someone else to approve it. So then they lose the autonomy. So you have to have two people as owners and approvers, and then things can flow relatively quickly.
So maybe I like where you're going with get more things in. We probably need to push for more people to get owners files so they can approve this stuff themselves and then get notified with the reviewers on, hey, come review this stuff. Because some of the charts that are doing that, I've just stopped looking at because it's taken care of. It's always the new additions and then the charts that don't have owners files, or the ones that only have one owner, that there's a problem. And that's
Add a check to your CI that says you don't have an owner's file.
Yeah. Oh, and then the ones where CI is broken and intermittent and weird, but I haven't even had time to go chase those down, trying to keep up with everything.
So the other side of the owner stuff is, like you said, we could just go and say, hey, everybody has to add an owner's file. The problem is they have to be also Kubernetes members.
True.
So that limits the amount of folks. Like we could go in and say who's committed the most or who's added the most lines of code to this chart and add them to owners. Then we have to go find them, chase them, get them to apply for membership, which has been harder than I would have thought. We did this exercise like a few months ago, right after the Helm Summit, and we're like, all right, we're going to go, get all the owners. We got a few, but I don't know that it actually solved the problem and gave us the right velocity.
So one thing that I wanted to throw out there, and this is kind of going back way to the beginning, somebody said that these guys submitted this change, and then after a month, they just kind of threw their hands up and went, well, you guys are making this slow. I mean, on the counterpoint to that is, I think it may be worth setting the expectation that, hey, just because you submit a chart or a PR does not mean that you should bet your business on that PR getting in within a specific time frame, because this is not just about your business. I mean, yeah, we want to get PRs in as quick as we can, but especially when something like this, we go, hey, this needs more discussion before we decide whether this is legit or not. That discussion has to be given some room to happen. And I think in this case, a month is totally legit to have that discussion and go back. And if they just can't wait that long, then yes, by all means, go host your chart somewhere else until we've had time to discuss and get back to you and say yes or no.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think, though, we should have had the discussion on the issue. Just like any open source project, we shouldn't have to have the person join this meeting. They're in a different time zone, so maybe completely inconvenient for them to be here. We have an open issue where we can have a thread to discuss it. So if possible, we should just hash things out in those threads.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to move the discussion away from the issue when I suggested getting on a call. It just sounded like that would be easier to hash out. I forgot to take into account that Tamal was in a different time zone entirely. But yeah, I agree. In general, we should try to keep discussion to the issues where possible.
So, but here's the thing, right? We keep coming back to charts, and folks think about it the way we think about NPM, right? I'll just use NPM as the model, where you've got this one giant monolith that just holds everything, right? It's just one massive package repository. And other systems like apt and there's lots of other systems use a distributed model where there is a central repo. I mean, even I was poking at Rust's model, because Rust has an index that you download, and it's similar to the model we use. But of course, you can have other, with these models that do this, you can have multiple registries and indexes, just like Docker. There's Docker Hub, then there's Quay, there's GCR. Lots of people have their own on-prem. It's kind of this distributed model for different registries. And Helm is actually built on that model. But I know a lot of folks with businesses and things like that tend to think of, here's the central repo, get it here. Maybe there's a way we can say, host your own, here's how you can do it, and here's how maybe you can make that more discoverable. And then they'll be more interested in hosting their own, and people will know how I can add it. I don't know how to solve this problem, but that might be a way to go.
Yeah.
Or maybe we could. Oh, go ahead.
To Joe's point on the people that are kind of banking on the charts repo, I think another side of it is that we don't have great policy documented. So you might have a change that you think is innocuous and totally fine within the bounds of, what the repo should expect, and that might cause a hang up. So things like that just kind of come out of nowhere. So that's where, I've been relatively lenient for things that we don't already have documented somewhere to say you can't do this, or we have to inspect these kinds of changes more or less. Anything like that we should have in the technical requirements or somewhere like that.
Is there a way to set priorities in those different Helm repos, like they have with like I think with RPM, you can say, look, this repo has this priority. So if there's anything here, it gets installed before anything else, or maybe layers.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything built in.
Yeah, I think because the way Helm uses namespaces to reference different repos, so you have stable / or whatever /.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing as far as discoverability,
I don't know. Oh, just layers, local /.
one of the things for discoverability is, and I don't know how hard this would be to implement as a repo thing, is like somebody mentioned the package repos for Linux. And the EPEL repo for the Fedora distribution actually has a package that you can download and install, and it configures your package configuration to add that repo. So I wonder if there's a possibility where we could say, hey, here's a place where you can add a description of your repo, and then you can point your Helm client and say like Helm repo add or Helm repo list, and it goes out to this, kind of listing of repositories and says, here are all the repos you can add. Which one do you want to add?
Yep.
That's an interesting idea, yeah.
Yeah, is there as we talk about stable / and then incubator /, could we add a local / so local copies of charts? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the ideal case is that we can move fast enough to get these changes in, or that those chart maintainers have full autonomy to check things in. I think it's just hard based on the way we've been doing things and having kind of curated charts to go full bore the other way. I haven't found a great model yet, unfortunately.
Well, it's all CIs or Jenkins. Mostly.
Jenkins
Sort of.
and Circle, yeah.
Okay, I've had a bit of experience with that, with Circle and Jenkins. So if there's any CI stuff we want to add, I can maybe have a go at it.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of linting type stuff that Matt added in the repo already, and that's really great. That's kind of that's what I bank on Reinhardt for most of those types of checks.
Cool.
It's going to help for reviewers to just be able to hit a button and go. I don't know that it'll catch everything, but the more we can bolster there and feel confident that a green light means go, the better we are.
Yeah, push the curation into CI. Yeah, but how do you automate the curation? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think one point about the curation is that I think it is good to have best practices and have some sort of be ensured that the charts in the stable repo generally follow the best practices. I think that's valuable, and comparing it to some other package managers out there like npm, like apt, there's a slightly different use cases in that what you're installing is the upstream software directly, and it's not a set of manifests that are kind of generic, Kubernetes related, and may have certain best practices applied to them. So a lot of the best practices that we have are based on how things are configured within the cluster, and not necessarily to do with the actual application, right? So how storage clusters are used, how RBAC is installed, and stuff like that. I think there is a lot of value in having a gate there just to check that those things are being done in a correct and also standard way, I guess.
Yeah, the hard thing for me is that I can't keep tabs anymore. Like when we were at 50 charts and seeing these patterns come up, I could keep track of them. Now I can't tell if it should be rback.enabled or rback.true or rback.do the thing. I don't know how to keep track of all that stuff without spending, an hour per PR making sure that all the stuff that's added, especially new charts.
Yeah, I mean that's why.
How do we handle that?
Sorry. So that's kind of why we started putting together the review guidelines doc, which basically, because before what we used to do is, whenever we see someone trying to configure RBAC, we point to another chart that we knew followed the best practices. But if we can just point to a concise doc which just shows the different patterns and the best practices for those for the pattern, then it's a much easier way just to refresh your memory and check, it's actually, we use rbac.create everywhere and not rbac.install. But yeah, I do agree. So it's kind of halfway there. We have we have a review guidelines doc, but there's a lot of things that aren't documented yet. So RBAC is actually one of them that hasn't been documented.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I didn't know that was around.
RBAC is actually documented. It probably just takes a link to the RBAC doc in the Helm repo. It's kind of, yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I've been pointing people to that. I know red charts. Yeah, go there. How much of this can we push into CI?
It's hard because it's templates.
Yeah.
So the YAML doesn't actually tell us anything once it's been rendered about how they're using this stuff. So it can be tough. So Reinhard, are you mostly keeping this one up to date, or who's the owner of this?
The guidelines?
Yeah, the guidelines doc.
Yeah, I mean, I initially created them, but there's, I think different people have contributed, I think.
Okay. Because I think one way to do it is if you find something that's wrong in a PR that you're gonna point out to someone and say, can you fix this? Can you make sure it's added here? And then at least I can try to make sure that I've got this open while I'm doing my chart reviews and see if there's things there.
Okay.
Awesome.
Or I could push it into the Helm create. Does it use Helm create?
Yeah,
this is an example.
Yeah, I think a lot of these are already implemented in there.
Okay.
The problem is that not everybody starts with Helm create, unfortunately. But
yeah, I guess if we
most are
point them to both things, then yeah.
Yeah, I usually point people to Helm create when they create new charts, and the helper template doesn't look like the current one in Helm create. So I tell them, please look at what Helm create gives you and update.
Cool.
So there's a couple. Sorry. So I was going to say there's a couple good discussion points from this, but I did want to just get an overall consensus on what people, because it sounds like the people who are interested in this have commented and raised their thoughts, but I think we need to make a decision on what we actually want to put into guidelines here. So I think I agree with Vic what you said about the notes being the place to make this obvious. Matt Fisher raised a good point that if a parent chart includes a child chart that is collecting data, then you won't see the notes for that child chart, so you may not know. But I think that I guess the only way to really fix that right now is to see if there are any parent charts doing that, then get those parent charts to also include a note in the notes.txt. I don't think there are any today. Or disable it. I don't think there are any today, so I don't think it applies today, but it's something that we'd have to actively think about when reviewing.
Yep, makes sense to me.
I just added a comment in that issue.
Great, thanks.
Cool. Matt, Farina, did you have any ideas of how we could transition to a different model with the repo that would be more parallelizable, more bandwidth?
With the repo, I would.
Because I think that is the core of the problem, right? Like, do you agree that the fact that we have this kind of funnel of charts into one repo is part of the issue?
Yeah. And when I think short term, part of me, so Helm is designed around the apt model, very specifically around the Debian apt model. And so there's probably a lot we can gain from that, right? So if I look at Ubuntu, there's some repos that are automatically added that are used by apt out of the box. But for a lot of things, go build your own. In fact, Launchpad helps you create your own apt repos and tells you what to do to go add it. And then people can add that to their own docs. And I don't know how many times when I'm on Ubuntu, I do the same thing. I go add something. Now, if I'm going to go into the store interface, that doesn't work. And now there's a new thing on Ubuntu called, what is the new store thing they've got? Snaps.
Mm-hmm.
That gets around that goes back to that central rather than decentralized model. And so this is kind of the whole, the searchability and discoverability. I think if there was a way to have a searchable thing, kind of like what kubeapps has done, and even if you go over to the CNCF landscape, landscape.cncf.io, where you have this ability to visualize and find things, but you could have multiple sources submit to it, and then people could maintain their own repositories to find stuff, right? I think that could be an option. And if somebody says, go install my own, I mean, even, so I'm playing around with the service catalog. The service catalog has their own thing. You go add it as a repo, and then you can install service catalog stuff, right? Because they understand there's this decentralized model, we can do that. If we were able to up the discoverability somewhere, then people could have more of that distributed model where they manage it themselves. This comes back to the same thing with Packagist, right? Packagist is a metadata repository. If we had something like that, then the charts could be like the Ubuntu ones that just ship with it rather than everything. And then people could, and we could be slower, we could be meticulous, we could be a pain in the butt. And then other people could submit theirs elsewhere because the discoverability was still there, right?
Does Chart Museum help us get here in any way? Doesn't it aggregate sub-repositories?
They're working on a lot of this stuff. I don't know if it's ready, but we probably should go chase with them. I don't know if they want to host that public service, right? As a startup,
well, we can,
things, yeah.
We can host it, right? I would just want the software that can actually do the use case, which would be to aggregate things, and I personally would be fine with blessed repos, GitLab, apps code, these ones that we've seen the charts and they're relatively mature, being sub repositories where we provide them as part of stable, which is the main stable stuff that comes out of our repo plus the additional blessed repos aggregated through some Chart Museum or whatever endpoint that is then becomes the default in Helm or something like that, or a third repository or something like that. Maybe there's an extras that we can add as part of Helm that then points that off at the blessed.
So from a UI side of things, I think I'd be happy to add more repos to kubeapps Hub, and that would definitely increase the visibility there. And again, it would. I think it's with Monocular, there isn't really a nice way to add user-provided repos yet, so it would have to be done by us hosting that service. We'd have to manually go and configure those repos that it's indexing. But if there's a small set of curated ones, we can definitely go and do that. And
what if they wanted to go more than a small set of curated? What would the direction have to be for kubeapps to? Well, first of all, if it went beyond that to a broader scope, the same way that Packagist has, they're just all over the place. Is that something that kubeapps might be interested in?
I think so. Yeah, I think that would be a good. I have mentioned this before, where it'd be nice for someone to log into kubeapps and add their own charts there, and then have that be the place that they pull from as well. So yeah, I'd be definitely open to considering that.
So you could have it where the install instructions say, add this repository if you haven't done it already, and then follow these commands to do it?
Yeah, and actually that already exists today with the incubator repo. So if you go to any of the incubator charts in in Cube Apps Hub, it
Okay.
shows you the command to add the repository before installing the chart. Yes, it's just that right now all those repositories are indexed manually or configured manually in the indexer.
Okay.
So adding a new one would require a new deploy. But yeah, if we can get a way to do that more dynamically and have people add their own repos after logging in, that'd be a really neat feature.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That I think would be a great idea if we could push that more up front.
Yep.
I like it.
And I will look at Chart Museum and see what's available today for this use case.
Okay. Yeah. Chart Museum doesn't provide a UI. It just provides the hosted service.
Yeah. I
and
actually
somebody
care more about the repo, the
Okay.
Helm side of UX rather than Cube Apps. I think that's my what I think is the primary UX for users is install Helm and then see what's in the repo. But I think that the visibility in the UI is important too.
So how about this? One of the things we have to do is we'd have to find out who will pay for hosting all of that stuff, because Chart Museum, while it runs as a service, it stores everything in object storage basically, right? S3, whatever. We'll actually have to find somebody to pay for that hosting long term as it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. So that's probably one of those things we'd have to chase down. But
Stick it in Wasabi. It's pretty cheap.
Yeah, Uncle CNCF might be able to provide some dollars for that.
exactly. And so we should probably go start chasing that down. In some of my other conversations, I'll start feeling it out to see
Cool.
what the options are for something like that. But yeah, I wouldn't mind going that multiple thing way and then have a nice UI, have Cube Apps make it discoverable, have this nice hosting option, because we end up making the ability to store that stuff far more scalable than it is today.
Totally.
And I like that. And then, of course, we could do things like for people who've got, so one of the things that I've been delinquent on, I'll take that, is taking our CI process and moving it into something anybody can stick in a containerized workflow. We could then take what we do for CI that we've learned, and we could, at least the static analysis stuff, we could package that up and say, you want to put this in GitLab CI? Great, here's how you do it. You want to put this in Circle CI? That's great, here's how you do it. You want to do it in Jenkins? Great, here's how you do it. And we could give people those building blocks so that in all the different CI systems you could use, they have what they need to do it. And so we could scale that model out horizontally far better.
Have you actually started working on this?
No. I got a repo set up, but I haven't.
Vaporware.
I started doing something in that direction because I could also use it on my current project. So I might do something as well, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. I was actually going to start with our scripts that we'd already done and then package them up.
That will come around.
Yeah. So we've got a repo. If you want access to it, it's under the Kubernetes Helm org. If we want to start doing it there, I can add other users and let people get going on it. It's an empty repo right now, but it exists.
Okay.
So the other thing we may want to do is pay close attention to what's happening with repos in Helm free, because I think they're talking about a built-in push model, and we may want to just see how that works for us, especially considering this, where if we want to have an easy way for people to just add things, but still have them still centrally locatable, then we could try to see if Helm free builds in native support for that somehow.
Yeah, so the push stuff that we're working on, I think Josh from Chart Museum is kind of spearheading that, looking at the API for it, because it's just like Helm has downloaders, right? Where a plugin can implement S3, just like there's the Helm S3 plugin. And you can say S3:// and it knows how to pop into the plugin to do it, to fetch it. We were going to do the same thing with uploaders, is the idea, but there would be a default implementation. And so that default implementation, as long as that works for whatever we have as the central thing, we'll just work out of the box. But then you could do it for S3 and others with plugins.
Yeah, when I read the proposal, I wasn't sure what it meant by the default implementation, because if it's not something backed by Chart Museum or a storage bucket, then you can't really push to an HTTP endpoint, right? Or, well,
exactly.
It has support for it, but
we were looking at Chart Museum, hopefully to work out the default implementation with Chart Museum.
Okay.
I wrote the proposal, and that's why the language is nebulous, because we wanted to give Chart Museum some time to work this out. And to Josh's credit, he's working out through all those hard things, like how do we handle authentication and authorization, right? How do we make sure you have permission to do this and let people log in and jump through all of those hoops? And so he's chasing down all of that stuff to make it work, and he's going to try and do it as a plugin in Helm 2 to prove it out, and then we can fold it hopefully into Helm 3 by default.
That's good to know.
The real hard part ends up being index files. For those index.yaml files, pulling them down. I did a bunch of testing work, and it turns out that the way we handle things is the worst case scenario. Right? If you look at libraries you could use, the way we parse, the file format we've chosen, everything, it is as far as memory goes, the worst case scenario here. I did a bunch of analysis on large files. Like I created a 200 meg YAML file because I figured our central repo is going to get pretty big, right?
Right.
It's going to be a problem eventually. So I said, what's a terrible case scenario? So at the Helm Summit, somebody else did this, the folks over at JFrog, and they found, well, we're going to run into problems. And so I started doing stuff. And here you can see we did some benchmarking, or I did some benchmarking. And the top one, the worst case scenario with memory is the library we use. If you actually just switch to the normal Go YAML library, it uses, to go from the normal YAML library to the one we use is like 2.2 times the memory.
Wow.
And if you just did everything in JSON and use some pointers and stuff in there, it's actually 1/10 the memory of the case we use today. So if instead of an index.yaml, we had an index.json and then just use the default JSON parser in Helm, it'd be 1/10 the memory.
Yeah, I remember
Wow.
us discussing this now, I think. And I think it makes sense because the index is machine readable anyway, so there's no reason for it to be in YAML, really.
Yeah, so we can look at ways of improving the memory issues we've been having. But that's Helm stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a... Sorry.
Go ahead.
So there's two more things here on the agenda. So one of them was this discussion around NFS provisioner charts. And this came up again recently with one of my coworkers submitting a NFS provisioner PVC chart. So I would quite like to make a decision on this and have something go in. I think there were two winners here, and both serving kind of different needs. There's an NFS server provisioner chart which runs the server NFS server in cluster and mounts that on a read write once persistent volume. So, for example, an EBS volume if you're on AWS, and then exports that as a NFS volume to be used as read write many elsewhere, and it uses the whole storage class provisioner approach to do that. And then the other one is a NFS client provisioner, which is similar to the server, except that the NFS server is outside the cluster and you would have to point to it from that client chart. So I think both have valid different use cases, and I think both should go in. I was just curious if anyone had any thoughts around this.
Trident does it. We use we've got NetApp. We're using there's a Trident provisioner for NetApp storage. I think it uses this. And I think it makes an NFS server inside and then provisions the storage. I'm not sure. That's a little useful.
Okay. Is there a chart for Trident yet, or is?
I don't think so. I've been tempted to write one for them, but I haven't had the time yet. I may do that because we're using it quite a bit. It's all cube resources right now.
Right. Yeah, and now that there's support for external storage provisioners, or better support for external storage provisioners, I imagine we're going to get a lot more of these coming in as well. So,
yeah, storage is a thing.
Okay, well, it sounds like no one has any specific thoughts about this one. I've written a comment in the issue anyway, so we'll see what the maintainers of each chart or of each PRs think about it, and we can go forward from there.
Yeah, it probably depends on your provider. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, how they implement stuff and what versions they use and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's good to have a different range of options here, where one you have the server running in cluster and the other a server pointing to a service elsewhere, because that just makes it more flexible.
I'll have a look at this after this and some comments on it if I can.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then the last one is Kubernetes version support. So for a while, we've mentioned that we officially support N and N-1 of Kubernetes, which where N is usually the version that is the highest version supported by most of the providers, which I believe right now is still 1.9, even though 1.10 is out. But when I was looking around for this, I noticed that it's still not actually written anywhere in the repo.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah. The top level README.
Ah.
I wrote it. That's the only reason I know where to find it.
We're still at 1.8. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we want to get to the world where we can support what Kubernetes does, which is N-2. So Kubernetes officially supports, 1.8, 1.9, and 1.10 right now.
Yeah, I think we're entire release behind. We're running Tectonic. So.
Yeah, and we want to get there. So I'm totally okay with charts doing that, but I would say it's unofficial support from us, the maintainers, who we've already talked about being totally overworked, right? And not able to scale. So that's another part of the reason here. What I would say with this, though, is there's actually one of the weird problems here, right? Capabilities.api-versions.has, you actually have to have Tiller to do this. We don't have a way to detect it otherwise, right?
So you mean if you're so if you're using Helm template, that wouldn't work, or
Helm template's going to have trouble with this because it doesn't have that information unless you're running in Tiller. This is one of the places where Helm template's going to fall on its face. And that's the reason that we went to the Git version. We probably need to have a way to have a default for these, which would be probably the latest, which would be apps v1 and things like that. And then we probably need a way to be able to pass in a file to say what else there is. So if we're running something in CI for linting or things like that, when we're doing template, to generate that out for CI, to have a way to actually tell it use a different version from the latest. But that's the thing that'll bite us, is Helm template.
Yeah, if we can, I would prefer that we advise people not to use capabilities at all because of these issues. And also it tends to mean, like, if you look at this PR, it's kind of hacky and hard to maintain. And the question is, when do you remove extensions v1 beta 1, or do you have that in there forever?
Yeah, and the only reason we still even have that in Kubernetes clusters is because there's an API policy that says alphas go out the next release. They're just gone. Betas stick around for 2 releases or 6 months, and that's it. But the problem is there's a bug in Kubernetes right now that doesn't let them remove old API versions. So because that's not getting fixed, we're not ripping out the old betas and stuff like that until that gets fixed. And at some point, they're just all going to be ripped out. At this point, we really should only have apps v1 and apps v1 beta 2. Even be supported, because I think even 1.8 supports apps v1 beta 2, I think, as far back as Kubernetes goes.
Yeah.
There are some people who are running ridiculously old versions out there, though, that are no longer supported. And we can probably say with our repo, we don't need to do that. But I think if we can, going back, N-2 is a good idea. But that'll get easier and easier here, because I think with 1.11, that's 1.9, 1.10, and 1.11 will all have apps v1 in it. That makes this a lot easier on us to go clean that up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even now with 1.10 coming out now, 1.8 to 1.10, it's pretty much the same.
All right.
Sorry, can you mute?
There, I muted him.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. So I think in this pull request, I'm just going to note back to that README and get them to remove this helper here and just stick to, I think probably apt v1 beta 2 probably makes sense if that's supported in 1.8.
Yeah.
Are they changing the there was some talk when they were doing 1.10, they wanted to change the development cycle to
3 times a year?
3 times a year instead of 4. Yeah.
Yeah, did that actually come to be, or was I just talk?
Yeah. I noticed it when they did 1.10. I haven't been following much, but I think it's currently it's like a 12-week release cycle.
Yeah, they're looking at ways of increasing the development time you have in Kubernetes. And so one of the things on that they've talked about is if they can get all tests green, Kubernetes, I don't know if it's ever happened, then they're going to give people extra time to develop and push code freeze back. We'll see. That's a big ask. We've never had all tests green before, normally. So they're trying to give people a carrot, but yeah, the window's is getting way too short. Okay, but we are actually out of time here. We're actually 4 minutes over. So, Adnan, do you have what you need on that one?
I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, and then I think we could start recommending people do a changelog too, for major changes. And we can probably point to, there's a site that says, here's how you should do your changelog. Always create a changelog.
Yeah.
And so we can point people to that for the recommendation on how to write it.
And how to pull it out can be the other question.
Yeah, and actually in one of the issues, someone linked to something else as well related to this. Let me just try and find it. It was the analytics and charts issue. And someone pointed to... Oh, actually, it wasn't the analytics and charts issue. Oh, well, I'll try to find it. And I can't remember what it was called, unfortunately. But it was some sort of, I think it was, semantic release is what it was.
Okay.
And I think it was a way to build a changelog from Git commits.
Oh, that'll be hard in our repo. But in their own, it should work.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that would be the main issue, being able to... So there are commit linters where you could lint for this, but I think it's probably going to just make it more difficult for people to contribute. So it's probably not worth doing it.
Semantic release, I love it. The image at the bottom, it's Bender holding up a sign that says "Kill all humans."
Brilliant.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'll post this up here shortly to the web, to YouTube, where we record all this stuff. Thanks everyone for coming. Is there anything else we should talk about, Adnan, before we go?
I think we're good. Does anyone else have anything to bring up?
I'm going to apply for membership today. But,
Great. Do you have the sponsors you need? I'd be happy to sponsor.
Yeah, Matt and Reinhard said yes today. So yeah,
Perfect.
I'm going to do it today and gather my list of PRs.
Great.
Sounds great.
Hey, congratulations to our team members who work at Microsoft. You now work for a Linux distribution vendor.
I don't know if any of them are on right now. Yeah. I saw that. That's funny.
Didn't they? Was that thing they made to deploy? What's the name? Yeah, they wrote a Linux distro to do
their
network
IoT
layering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're calling it like Azure Spark or something like that. It's for IoT stuff.
Yeah.
I know they did write one for the network layer in Azure.
Yeah, they are. Microsoft's long been a big Linux user and contributor to the kernel. It's just neat to see a distro come out of Microsoft, like a week or 2 weeks after the Windows reorg announcement. So.
Fun.
All right, hell froze over. Yeah. All right, folks, I'm gonna go ahead and end this. Thanks, y'all. I'm off to other meetings now. Have a wonderful day. And one last thing: there will be no meeting in 2 weeks because it's KubeCon, and so we typically cancel all the meetings that week.
Damn it! I was going to go, but I didn't get the time.
So yeah, we won't be meeting during KubeCon. We'll let people do stuff face to face. And so it'll be 4 weeks, but next week we do have office hours to just review charts and talk about whatever. Those are still on, but the normal meetings like this will be off next time. All right.
Cool.
Sweet. Thanks, Matt. Thanks,
I'll try to
everyone.
make the next one. See you guys.
All right.